Hello everyone and welcome back to lesson 2 of your year of tarot. This week we're going to look at the anatomy of a tarot deck. This lesson is going to briefly look at what a standard tarot deck is made up of. I'm also going to touch on other systems of tarot so that you can understand that there are other things out there. We're going to be doing some tarot myth busting and I'm going to go over the story of how I picked my first tarot deck. So get comfy, get cozy, and let's learn about the tarot. This course is focusing on the standard Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. This is the most common and most popular tarot deck that you will see out there today, and a lot of modern decks are based off of this particular system of tarot. We will also be looking at what makes a good beginner tarot deck, things to look out for if you haven't yet chosen your first deck and are looking to very soon. So the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the one that we are working with throughout this course, is one of the most common tarot decks that you are going to see today. It's got some of the most iconic iconography. They are some of the most well-known cards and the ones that people can pick up quite easily. The standard Rider-Waite-Smith deck is in two main sections. Section 1 being the minor arcana, which are the 56 cards that make up the bulk of the deck. There are 10 in each of the 4 suits, which makes up 40 cards. And then there are 16 court cards. The 4 suits are your wands, swords, cups, and pentacles. Some of these suits will have alternate names. It's very common to see coins or stones instead of pentacles. It's very common to see batons or clubs instead of wands. Normally you will still see cups or chalices alongside the swords. They are the two that tend to be fairly standard among most decks, even if you're getting different designs. Of course, there are decks that change this completely. There are some that use seashells. There are some that use different currencies. There are so many different kinds of tarot decks that you can find one that fits your aesthetic, your style, and your personality really easily. Within each suit are the court cards. Normally, these will be a page, a knight, a king, and a queen. Sometimes they are mother, daughter, father, son. They'll tend to follow this general idea, but sometimes the relationship between the court cards might change depending on your deck. We will look at minor arcana and court cards all in their own separate sections of this course. We're not going to go too deep into that in this lesson. Just understanding what the difference is enough. Then we have the major arcana. The major arcana cards are some of the most well-known cards. Most people can place a major arcana card even if they haven't really seen a tarot deck in depth before. Thanks to popular culture, movies, TV, books, you'll see the major arcana tarot cards pretty much everywhere. The major arcana consists of 22 cards, starting at 0 with the Fool and going through to 21 with the World. Sometimes the major arcana is called the Fool's Journey, where you start as this often naive character, taking a chance, taking a step into the world, through to that wisdom and experience of the world. And you see all of the different archetypes of the journey throughout the major arcana. Major arcana cards tend to stay the same between decks. There are some exceptions. Some artists in their deck will change a few of the major arcana cards to work better for them. It depends on the artists, it depends on the artwork, and what the creator is trying to convey in their tarot deck. The art will change your interpretation of the deck. A key thing to remember is that symbology is cultural. Your own experiences in the world are going to mean that you might read something ever so slightly different to how the artist intended it. And the artist's own cultural experiences may mean that you don't see a tarot card in the same way as them. As long as it's well explained by the artist in the deck, that's absolutely fine. Some people will say that when you can read the basic Rider-Waite-Smith deck, you can then read any deck that's based off the Rider-Waite-Smith method. To an extent, that is true. Because they're all based off of roughly the same system, you can get a roundabout reading that way. However, as you go through a journey with your own deck, you will see that they have different voices, different personalities. They read very differently. The artist interpretation is one of the main reasons behind that. But also the person that writes the guidebook, often the person that designed or commissioned the deck, they might change the meaning of the cards a little bit based on their own cultural experience, their own societal or life experience. That's why it's important that with any tarot deck that you choose, you get to know it really well and that you are happy reading that deck. And it's all right if you can read one deck really well and you really struggle with another one. Or if you can pick the same card and the meanings might generally be the same, but the details could be different thanks to the artwork that's in it. That's why picking your own deck and a deck that works best for you is one of the best things you can do. But before we touch on what makes a good deck, let's look at the other systems of tarot or cartomancy that exist. In last week's video, we talked about how the invention of the game tarocchi, the Italian playing card game, and divination with cards in general kind of came about and how they eventually formed to become their own practice of the tarot. Cartomancy is divination using cards. And tarot is a form of cartomancy, but not all cartomancy is tarot. Because tarot is based off of the Italian playing card game, the tarocchi, technically it's only a tarot deck if it follows that same system. Otherwise, it's a cartomancy deck. This is a technicality. In most books and in a lot of common knowledge today, tarot and cartomancy are completely interchangeable. I like to specify that I'm using the tarot if I'm using this particular deck. Other things are cartomancy, like oracle cards are technically cartomancy. Reading with regular playing cards is not tarot, but it is cartomancy. And tarot is cartomancy and tarot. If it's based off of the Italian playing card game tarocchi and follows the same deck structure, then you are reading the tarot. The Tarot de Marseille is the oldest set of the tarocchi playing cards that are still in use today. Very soon after their invention, we don't know exactly when, they also became an esoteric tool, being used in divination and fortune-telling games, as well as the game of tarocchi itself. Most modern-day systems of tarot are actually based off of the Tarot de Marseille, the most famous being the Rider-Waite-Smith system and the Thoth system of tarot, both of which are based off of that Tarot de Marseille, but changed slightly to fit their respective audiences with the invention and dream of the specific artists and creators in mind. The pip cards, or the 1 to 10 of the minor arcana, are also read in a much more structured fashion in the Tarot de Marseille compared to the bit more interpretive Rider-Waite-Smith series. The structure of the Tarot de Marseille is something that you would find very familiar if you already know what a tarot deck looked like. The Lenormand system of cartomancy is not as well known, but has a very interesting history. Lenormand is an example of one of those systems that is cartomancy but isn't tarot. Marie-Anne Lenormand became one of the big names in cartomancy, reading the French style of playing card for royalty and peasants alike. She was a well-known fortune teller, and her legacy has carried on even if it has been incredibly muddied. After the death of Marie-Anne Lenormand, a 36-card tarot deck was published called La Petite Lenormand. This card deck is actually based off of something called A Game of Hope, which is a kind of like a fortune-telling card game that predates Lenormand. But after her death, her name was attached to this card game, and thus started these mysteries and these myths and rumours that there is an original Lenormand tarot deck. In reality, Marie Lenormand had no children. She left everything to her nephew upon her death, a sizable fortune plus all of her cards. Her nephew, being a very devout Catholic, burned all of it. He took the fortune and destroyed his aunt's cards. There is no such thing as an official Lenormand cartomancy deck, no matter how often you see it. There are people that have recreated a Lenormand style tarot deck, but the oldest version, La Petite Lenormand, has only 36 cards. It's its own system of fortune telling and reading, and it's a bit more strict and prescriptive, but it is a very interesting way to start reading. The Thoth deck is also one of the most popular tarot decks that you will see out there, based off of the Tarot de Marseille and took inspiration from the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot. The Thoth deck was created by Aleister Crowley, who is controversial at best. He was the founder of the Thelema philosophy, about using magic, Kabbalah, astrology, alchemy, so on and so forth. Crowley wanted to update the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. This was published in 1910, and he decided to create his deck between 1938 and 1943. It was a 5-year period, a project that only was meant to take 6 months. He commissioned the artwork to be done by painter Lady Frida Harris, who made these really lovely watercolour drawings that you will see all over the Thoth deck. The Thelema philosophy, plus astrology, the Kabbalah, tarot and mysticism all feature very heavily in this deck, making it an interesting experience to read, but often it can be quite convoluted, especially for new tarot readers. That's why I think it's always great to start with the Rider-Waite-Smith, and if you would choose to use Thoth later on, you can. Learning the system that Crowley decided he wanted to change will give you a better understanding of what the differences are. The deck would not be published until the late 1960s, meaning that Aleister Crowley and Lady Frida Harris never actually got to see their deck completed and being made public. And finally, let's look at the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. This is the iconic deck that we will be using for this tarot course. We will be using this system of tarot in particular because of how widespread and accessible it is. In 1910, the British occultist and philosopher Arthur Edward Waite published this tarot deck. At the time, it was only known as Rider-Waite Tarot Deck. The artist, Pamela Coleman Smith, was not accredited until much later, but she is the person who brought these cards to life. The deck would be published by Rider & Sons Publishing House. Initially, it was only called the Rider-Waite deck, and if you have older versions of this deck, it will only be called the Rider-Waite deck. Smith's contributions were on a sideline for way too long, but now all versions of this deck are published as Rider, Waite and Smith. Sometimes it is just called the Rider deck. That is how it's known in a lot of places. Both Smith and Waite were members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. It is in this order that they met. They became introduced to each other and then began working together to create this tarot deck. They were already studying the tarot using the Tarot de Marseille, and they wanted to use some principles of the Golden Dawn in their own deck, using their own artwork, using their own theories and thoughts and mysticism and magical practice, as most people do when creating their own deck. For those that don't know, the Golden Dawn were a secret order of occultists, mystics, magic users that were invested in spiritual development. This society doesn't exist today, but it does have a load of splinter groups that are still around. A special deck that I want to mention is called the Lo Scarabeo deck. This is a modern deck, and it's very interesting because it actually combines aspects of the Rider-Waite-Smith system, the Thoth system, and the Tarot de Marseille in a reading experience that's both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. It's an interesting deck and the artwork is beautiful, so definitely check that out at some point if you get the opportunity to. So now we've gone over some of the different systems of tarot, let's go over what makes a good beginner deck. Now, first thing to preface is there's no such thing as a bad deck. There's not. There's different decks with different needs for different people. But what makes a good, easy to learn beginner deck? Firstly, we're going to go with card quality. A sturdy card, something that's not too thick, not too thin, it doesn't feel really flimsy, it's easy for you to shuffle, it's a nice size for your hands, preferably, so that's why it's worth, wherever you can, trying to get card decks in person, or at least have a look at them in person. So you can find something that shuffles really well and is comfortable for you to use. You can feel that it's a really good quality cardstock, and it's up to you if you want black and white or you're in colour. Normally, colour is easier for someone to learn at the beginning because it does help a little bit in symbology. Next, it's that the iconography is very easy to understand, to the point where you can see what's happening in a card and determine it without having to look at the meaning. Even if it's just a surface level kind of determination and it's not a deep dive into it, there's a level that you can understand just by looking at the card. So, for example, let's look at the Three of Swords. When we look at the Three of Swords, we can see a heart that has been pierced by 3 swords. You can see that it's rainy and stormy in the background. So just by looking at this, you can see that there's a level of pain here. There's a lot of emotion. involved. And what's interesting, if you look at it, is while the heart is not broken, it is pierced, it is hurt. Background is stormy. You can interpret that as wind and as rain. You can interpret that as being turbulence and sorrow. So just by looking at this card without going in depth, you can kind of see the representation. That's what makes it a good deck. That's what makes it a good card and easy to understand. The next thing to look out for is that it comes with an easy to understand and accessible guidebook. Either the deck itself has a guidebook, or it has one that's easily accessible through a book or online. But there's a way for you to get the deeper meaning of each card that the artist had intended. You're not kind of being given a deck and let go, which is fine when you already understand how a deck works. But having a good guidebook is really useful for beginners learning. Particularly decks that come with a small guidebook that fits in the pack as well, so you can walk around learning with the guidebook. The next thing is that artist decisions are clearly explained in said guidebook. Why the artist has made a certain choice. They don't need to go in depth into every single card, but if they're doing something that is vastly different from the Rider-Waite-Smith system, having explained why is really helpful for new beginners. It will help you get an understanding and a grasp of your own deck. And finally, any differences in card names or by changing what one of the suits is from the Rider-Waite-Smith system is clearly explained. A book that is well written by a person is very easy to understand, clearly explains the thought process behind it, so you can decide whether you want to work with it that way or not. One thing to note is that not all decks are actually meant to be read. Some decks exist purely to showcase what an artist can do. They act more as an art project rather than a readable deck. You can theoretically use these and use the standard meanings from the Rider-Waite-Smith system to read said deck. However, if it's more showcasing what an artist can do, sometimes they're just meant to be looked at. You could find it more difficult to actually read the deck if the traditional meanings and the art on it don't really match up. Sometimes, if there's an artist who's very prolific and has a lot of prints, they might just put a print on each card and call it a tarot deck. It's a very common thing to happen. And it's okay if it does. Some decks are there just to be pretty, and that's fine. Earlier I said there's no such thing as a bad deck. That is true, unless it is AI or counterfeit. These are two things that are prevalent in the tarot world, and this is why you need to be very careful when you're buying a deck. General rule, do not buy it off of Amazon, Shein, Temu, any drop shipping site. That is because counterfeit decks are rife. You will be able to feel it when you get it. The card quality is thin, that it's falling apart, it doesn't shuffle well. Normally they're much, much smaller packets. And unfortunately, because it's so easy to counterfeit a deck through these sites, it often means that the original artists aren't getting paid for their work. Often cards will be taken, scanned in, and then someone will reprint the entire deck. You'll see that the colours are off, you'll see that the lines are off, you'll see that they're skewed and not quite right. And then they can just be easily print on demanded from a lot of different services, which means that the artist that put all their time and effort and energy into creating this deck does not get compensated at all. So the only thing I would say to you is please, please, please do not buy your decks off of Amazon, Temu or Shein. Any of these drop shipping sites, because you are more likely to be buying a counterfeit deck, which means that everyone suffers, you, the planet and the artists. If you are going to buy decks, best thing you can do is actually go to a store and feel the cards. See, do they fit in your hand? Do they shuffle well? Are you happy with them? If you're a little nervous and you don't feel like you can go and get a card in person straight away, that's okay. But buy from a reputable store that can tell you where they got their cards from as well. Little story time, my first deck. I'm going to tell you how I bought my first deck and the relationship I've built with my first deck. My first deck is here. I lied. My first deck is called the Haindwall Tarot deck. I love this deck. It is still my go-to deck and it is still the deck I use to read for others. I do not recommend it for beginners because all of those things that I just said were not there. But I had such an instant connection with this deck. I remember going to this kind of crystal hippie store every week as a kid, every single week without fail. And I saved up my pocket money. And this deck was bottom shelf, right at the back, covered in dust. No one saw it, no one looked at it. I doubt the shopping owner even remembered it was there at some points. But I went in every week, looked at this deck, saved up all of the pocket money that I could, did all of the chores, and finally got to go and buy this deck when I was 13. And it's still my favourite deck to this day. It was an instant, unexplainable connection to a deck. And that is something to listen to. If you have that with a deck, if you know straight away, this is it, I'm feeling something towards this deck, listen to it, because maybe that is the right deck for you in that moment. Even if it doesn't follow half of the advice I've just given, maybe that's the right deck. And always, the Rider-Waite-Smith is a great deck to start with. It is the original, and it's going to be the one that I'm explaining with through this course. Right, shall we bust some tarot myths? Myth 1. I can't buy my own tarot deck, it must be bought for me. This myth is everywhere and no one knows where it started, no one knows why it started, and it really bothers me. My theory is capitalism, because a lot of people I've seen will buy a deck, buy 2 decks then, and kind of gift both to someone else and then someone gift it back to you, so you both have a deck. So my theory is capitalism. It's not true. No one knows where it came from. Fight capitalism, buy your own deck. If you have that connection to a deck, get it. If you get gifted a deck and you love it, fantastic. But this is a complete myth. No one knows where it comes from. Everyone has their own theory. You can buy your own tarot deck. It's fine. Myth 2, you should not buy second-hand decks. This is a myth-ish. Second-hand decks are absolutely fine, especially if you're using it as a learning tool and a tool for psychology. If you're someone who practices in more esoteric circles or witchy circles like I do, and you're into energy sensing, some decks have an energy about them. They just do, especially if they're secondhand and they've been like well used. Sometimes they just have an energy, and those are the ones that I step back from. So secondhand decks in general are absolutely fine, and if you don't believe in any of that, feel free, go get those secondhand decks. They're often cheaper, really well cared for, and sometimes you can actually get some limited edition and beautiful art decks secondhand. This is secondhand. This is secondhand. I've got a number of secondhand decks that were gifted to me. I love my decks. It's not something to be afraid of. So you can buy secondhand decks. If you're someone who does energy work, just go and see the deck in person is my only advice. Myth 3, you must not read for yourself. Again, no one knows where this came from. There are so many myths around tarot that no one knows where they started. Often it was someone spouting some bullshit and to like a student, and then the student just ran with it and then put it on the internet and it ended up everywhere. But no one knows where this started either. You absolutely can, and I recommend reading for yourself. There's always the question of, when you read for yourself, is there a bias because of what you already want to know? But this is something that comes with practice. So with practice, you can do a reading for yourself and look at it a lot more objectively. What is the card actually trying to tell you? So you read for yourself as if you were reading for a client. And that is something that you can only do with practice of reading for yourself. Being able to separate yourself from the reading and let it just unfold without judgment. You absolutely can read for yourself. And throughout this course, I'm going to be urging you to. If you don't want to, that is fine. You never have to read for yourself if that's not something that you want to do. But I do recommend it as an excellent learning tool and to help you unpick your own brain and learn the cards better. Myth 4, you should not let people touch your deck, or you should not touch others' deck. Personal preference. It's complete personal preference. There's a lot of, in the tarot space online, there's a lot of personal preference things that people will say is law. This is one of those things. It's up to you. So for example, when I'm reading for a client in person, I get them to shuffle the deck. I get way better results from readings when the reader shuffles the deck. Some people don't want other people touching their deck. They've kind of worked with them, they're very careful and considerate and really loving their deck. They don't want others to touch it. That's fair. If that is you, more power to you. You do not need to let anyone touch your cards if you don't want to. And at the same time, if you feel like you don't want to touch someone else's cards, that's completely okay. If you're in a reading and the reader asks you to touch the cards, you should feel confident enough to say, I actually don't want to. And then the reader should be able to read for you. So it is a complete personal preference thing. It is not a hard and fast rule. You absolutely can touch other people's cards with permission, always ask, and you can let other people touch your cards as well if you want to. Again, personal preference, no rules. Finally, tarot is evil, death, witchcraft, all of the bad things. Tarot is a tool. This is what we explained in last week's lesson. It is simply a tool that you can use for your own uses. If you want to use it for witchcraft, fab, I do. But you don't have to. You can use it as a tool for psychology. You can use it as a tool for interpretation of your own dreams. You can use it to divine meanings from the rest of the world. You can use it to unpick the future and fortune telling. It's a tool. It is neutral. It's what you choose to do with it that matters. A lot of this is down to popular culture, movies, TV, all of that good and bad stuff when it comes to tarot. Part of that is that the death card means I'm gonna die. It doesn't. It doesn't. I have an entire lesson just dedicated to the death card. It's fine. It really is. It's one of my personal favourite cards. It does not mean you're gonna die. The death card means change, but that's not as dramatic, so the directors leave it out of the movies. It's not an evil, super dramatic, otherworldly thing. Tarot is a tool. Tarot very much exists in this realm. You use it for your own devices and you learn to use it your own way, in a way that you feel most comfortable with. Tarot is not anything. Tarot is neutral. How you use it matters, and what you want to do with it matters. Summary for this lesson. Buy from a reputable store if you're going to get a deck. If you're following along with this course, I recommend something that is based off of the Rider-Waite-Smith system. And if you are going to look at decks online, if you can, try and look at them in person. A lot of shops will have an open copy for you to look at, so you should be able to. You can also watch deck tours online. I love those. And there's literally someone kind of unboxing a deck and going through every single card so you can see all of the artwork. I love deck tours. They're really relaxing. So you can always go look at a deck tour online if you can't find a place that's stocking a deck that maybe is slightly more niche, slightly more specific. Homework, optional homework as always. This is creating a daily practice regardless of the amount of time that you have. If you have 10 seconds, if you have 30 seconds, if you have an hour, you pick your time frame. And all you're going to do, if you have a deck, is you're going to shuffle each day. Take one moment, whatever moment matters most to you. If you have 30 seconds in the morning when you're having your morning coffee, instead of scrolling on your phone, just take those few seconds to shuffle your deck. That is it. Even if it goes straight back in a box later or a pouch, just shuffle your deck. If you've got a couple minutes and more time, sit with it. Meditate on the feeling of the cards. Meditate on the sound of the cards. Maybe make a note of anything that jumps or pulls. You don't need to look it up, but make a note. And if you've got a little more time, each day you can shuffle, pull a card, and without looking up the meaning, just write down what you see. That's it. I see a blue background. I see 10 wands. I see a man carrying them. That's it. That's all you have to do. If you don't have a deck, your homework is simply this. Look at decks online or in person, but critique them based on this system. Would it be a good beginner deck? Is it a deck for you? Is it something you're feeling really drawn to? To continue with this course is going to be easier if you have a deck, but if you just want to watch these without having a deck, that's okay. Have a little look, analyse some tarot decks, and remember the one golden rule: do not buy them off of Amazon. Well done for getting through lesson 2 for your year of tarot. Remember, we've got the Patreon available. We've got the Mugwort and Linden tiers. If you would like more tarot related content, to join a tarot community and get extra bonus tarot content, or I have got one-to-one tarot mentorship that you can book if you find you're getting stuck on something. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next week for lesson 3. Bye. beep, 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 beep. Myth 3. That was 6. That's it. Oh, I've got a jumper. Ah, I got the lovers. I'm going to figure out what that means in the context of talking about my tarot course later. We're not going to unpack that right now.